Welcome to the Brand Doctor Podcast, strategies that help entrepreneurs build reputable and profitable brands. Here's your host, Henry Kaminsky Jr.
Are you the solution or the problem? In this episode, we're going to dive deep with my next guest, Dr. Alexandar Stein. And this guy has quite the resume when it comes to helping leaders and entrepreneurs build and grow their business. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Alexandar Stein to the show. What is going on, my friend?
Thanks so much, Henry. I'm really excited to talk to you and your listeners. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So let's get some context around who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Sure. So my firm is Dolus Advisors, and we advise senior business leaders, entrepreneurs, and boards with a core specialty in the human mind, basically, how people think, the underpinnings of behavior and decision-making. And my area of expertise draws from my training and experience as a psychoanalyst. And I started out actually in private clinical practice, seeing patients. And at some point, not long after I launched practice, decided that it was just a bit too limiting, even though it's very gratifying and important work to help individuals in that way. And ended up figuring out how to change that from practicing psychoanalysis to what I call deploying psychoanalysis, which is taking most of the ideas and precepts and everything that I had learned about how people operate and what inhibits them and what challenges them out into the business world to work with people in positions of influence and responsibility.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. So let's dive into today's topic of conversation. So a lot of us as entrepreneurs love to get in our own way. You know, I notice, like, I have a mentor that I meet with once a month, and, you know, we spend an hour together. And when he starts to reflect back some of my, concerns, I start to get these moments. Like, why didn't I think of that? Like, why am I making myself the enemy here? Why am I getting in my own way? And I feel a lot of entrepreneurs do this, and it stunts their growth. It prevents them from accomplishing the goals and the revenue goals that they're trying to accomplish. Where does this come from, and how can we help ourselves here?
Those are great questions, and it's wonderful that you also have somebody you use as a sounding board. One of the common ideas about being a business leader, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, is that it's lonely at the top, and it often is for lots of reasons. Not because you're all alone, but because there's really no one in your organization you can talk to reveal many of the struggles that everyone who is in that position has to deal with. And to have a knowledgeable, trusted confidant who you can use to help you look at your blind spots, to recognize that you have them, to be able to unravel those knots, and to help you problem solve all kinds of things that need to be addressed for you to be able to do your work effectively, and also to help everyone else thrive and to have your business flourish, is really critical. And, the reasons why they don't, or why many people don't, are many. And ultimately, they're, very individualistic reasons. What are the things that prevent people from going right when they should go left, or, from standing up when they should be sitting down, or as the case may be. But there's often a lot of stigma attached just to the idea of having that kind of vulnerability, to let yourself expose what could be considered a weakness, but which is really a strength, to somebody else, and to be able to sit in front of somebody else and say, I'm not sure what the right answer is, or I don't know what to do, or I did this and now I don't know how to undo it. Those are hard. And those are not the things that you read necessarily about in HBR or McKinsey Quarterly, or that they're going to teach you at an MBA school or business school. And these are private conversations. But the ROI on this kind of work is immeasurable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't agree more with you, because one of the things that we realized as I was working this month with my mentor was that the business is legit. The business is sound. Mm-hmm. Everything is in place that needs to be in place. The issue here, Henry, is you. Uh-huh. You have not fully committed to being comfortable in your own skin. And I have no problems being 1000% transparent with everybody that's watching or listening. Mm-hmm. And he saw a few glaring things. He said, when you came out to Santa Monica the other week, you committed to me that you were going to really become the teacher, the servant advisor. You weren't going to worry about external validation anymore. You weren't going to do XYZ things. Mm-hmm. Yet I still see somebody who has somewhat of a shattered self-image. Mm-hmm. And we need to, you either need to fully commit here or like get off the train, like, mm-hmm. right? And one of the things I really committed to after having that conversation was personal development and self-awareness. Mm-hmm. I think if you want to, this was an old Jim Rohn quote that I happen to love, but if you work on your job, you'll make a living. When you work on yourself, you can make a fortune. And I took that to heart. And so I've just been diving in and, to questions, deep questions, like, why do I like that? Why do I don't like that? Why do I dislike that? Why am I attracted to this person? Why am I not attracted to that person? Why am I making these decisions? Right. And so when you ask yourself these types of questions and really give yourself like some time to answer them, not just so quick, like you start to realize things, right? And I'll give you a funny example. I was in Hoboken, New Jersey the other day, coming out of a bachelor party, and I had to Uber home. And I said I could take the Escalade for $190, or I could take the Honda Pilot for like $65. Old Henry would have, without a question, gotten the Escalade, for the simple fact that Henry needed to be seen walking out of a bar into an Escalade. Mm-hmm. Where this time around, I looked and I was like, you know what? I'm going on the Pilot. Can I afford the Escalade? Sure. But I'm going on the Pilot today. Mm-hmm. And I got into the car, and it was crazy because the driver, we didn't shut up for an hour. He was he was such a fascinating individual. I had such a great conversation with him, and I got home safe, and I was like, I finally did something that I normally don't do. Why? So like, I want to hand that over to you. I mean, there's so many, and so that's a silly example, but like, if you could scale that example any which way you want, you see the point and you see the message behind it.
Sure. I don't think there's anything silly about it. It's actually to the point that I hear you making, that these kinds of micro examples of decision making that you can track from a prior motivation to a subsequent way of handling something have really profound effects. And by the way, I think you've already identified an upcoming episode of your podcast, which will be, from Escalade to Pilot, and your driver will be your next guest.
Oh, so, I love
it. You're already talking about one of my favorite and most important tools, which is asking why. So many people make decisions almost on autopilot, even if they're extremely thoughtful and well-educated and, even deliberate and considered or, controlling about everything that they engineer. There are so many things that go into making decisions, and they're just these complex clusters of mental activity. And being able to break down, why did I do this or not do that, is inordinately important. And you also reference for yourself the influences of internal and external, events. So, if you're doing certain things because you're looking for something to come to you from the outside, it's a very different set of decisions and motivations from what you're doing for yourself, which is not to say that you're disregarding its effects. You're not necessarily reckless or inconsiderate or unattached to your influence, but you're not governed by what you think you need from other people. So it's liberating.
That's huge.
As well as cost saving.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think, the topic of today's conversation, are we the solution or are we the problem? I think a lot of times, like you mentioned, we make snap decisions that we say an hour later, 2 days later, or a month later,
or never.
Yeah. How would things be different if I did not choose that decision and went the other route?
Right. So one of the other things that you're talking about that's embedded in asking why is not just the intellectual pursuit or even the cognitive system of unraveling a decision post facto, like doing an autopsy on a decision so that you understand its mechanics. That can be very difficult to apply in real time as it's coming up. Because, often we're just totally focused on moving forward, and we don't have the wherewithal always to be deconstructing things as they're happening. And so, being able to integrate, onboard people's input, you're speaking with your mentor and his being able to shake you up a bit about something about yourself, but you're not feeling wounded or humiliated or, essentially rebutting or spitting out what he had to say, but really taking it in and recognizing, I trust him and he has something worthwhile to offer. Let me chew on that for a while. And you're recognizing that there is something there, and then being able to connect those dots, which is often the hardest part. It's one thing for somebody to come in as an advisor or even as a coach or to go to an inspirational talk or to read an article or something and have those ahas. And basically you have this array of all the light bulbs that have gone off and you're like, I'm going to make it different now. It's never going to be like it was before. I'm going to make different decisions. Pilots from here on in, no more Escalades. And then you're overtaken by other impulses because it's really hard actually to connect those dots and for lots and lots of complicated reasons. And that's what I just want to finish that paragraph. It's one of the things that it is very important for everyone to understand, but particularly business leaders who are constantly navigating the roaring stream of work and decision making, which is that it is another magnitude of work on oneself, really, to be able to put these things together. And that one of the chief characteristics of even psychologically oriented writing in the business magazines is an oversimplification. It makes it seem as if all you have to do is follow the GPS and you're going to get to your destination. And it can be enormously frustrating or disheartening to not have that happen, or to realize that it takes much longer, or that the process is much more arduous, because it is.
So that was so good, dude. That was so good. So the question that I know my audience is wanting me to ask right now is, how does one get out of their own way?
Well, it's going to sound trite, but you've already laid it out for me, and so it's pretty there. And that is to recognize that you are in your way. So that's a start. If you keep externalizing these problems and saying, it's not me, it's, I hired the wrong people, or the market isn't aligned with what I'm delivering, or my product needs to be tweaked, or. And by the way, those things all have legitimacy. They could actually also be at play. It's rarely one thing or another. It's usually and, not or, in these clusters of challenges, especially if you're trying to scale a complicated business. But recognizing that you yourself, who you are as a person, what your decision-making characteristics are, what your personality is, what are your strengths and weaknesses, that this is the key element in the array, is often a harder realization than it sounds like it is, let's say, for you. Mm-hmm. And so, for many entrepreneurs, coming to that sort of looking in the mirror and saying, well, maybe I'm one of the issues here, is already enormous.
I was having this conversation the other day about how what I'm seeing lately is a tremendous amount of overconfidence in entrepreneurs, where they think, and this was me in my early 20s. I mean, you couldn't tell me what to do. I had all the answers. I was making money. There's nothing you could tell me that was going to change my mind, right? And so I was very arrogant. I was very, you could not tell me what to do. I had all this. I was puffed, and then it all came crashing down. And then reality checked me, like a linebacker from the Jets, right? And then I realized, maybe I don't have all the answers here. So. The overconfidence in people, the hubris that comes out in people sometimes, that kind of creeps in unexpectedly, can really. I heard Jay-Z actually talking about this the other day, where he said, in my earlier days, I wish I didn't have so much of hubris, because it really did stunt my growth. And so my mission, my goal with Unique Designs and the Brand Doctor brand is to help entrepreneurs abolish complacency, because they get to this level of confidence and they're like, well, I'm good here, right? Or they come and they'll say, you don't need to tell me anything anymore. I got this from here. And then they go and then they realize they don't. And then it's like, boom, they crash.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out, like, how can we serve those folks without sounding salesy, without sounding pitchy, how can we help those folks get a realization that, listen, man, or listen, miss, if we don't come back down and get centered with ourselves, we can be in for some serious trouble in the future. Right.
Well, generally speaking, I don't like to talk in generalities, but whenever you hear somebody say over anything, like overconfident, already you're pointing to something that's probably some kind of defense against something else. So, authentic confidence is super important. I don't know any successful people, much less successful entrepreneurs, who don't have, a big dose of legitimate confidence. You have to believe in yourself. You have to be able to take the buffeting of everyone who says no. You have to be able to take risks. But if you're filled with hubris and arrogance, you're probably trying to get away from feeling or being insecure or inadequate, or, you're basically putting up a front that pretends that everything is cool when it's definitely not. And, those are the pockets that are going to haunt you and tie your shoelaces together when you think you're not. And, a lot of business leaders, particularly, bootstrapping entrepreneurs, perhaps, who have, they don't have big VC funding, or, there's just not a lot of extra capital, will not add a line item to scarce resources to address these kinds of things, even though I think the strong argument can and should be made that there's almost nothing more important in a launching entrepreneurial venture than the entrepreneur, her or himself. And, there are lots of ways of dealing with that from, having work that can be done at discounted fees, or, some sort of hybrid arrangement that gives the advisor options and, skin in the game to the venture itself. It doesn't all have to be out of pocket expenditures, but these are the kinds of things, just like, having coffee in the morning and, making sure that there's paper in the printer and that the lights are on. Taking care of who you are is arguably the central ingredient in what needs to happen.
And what does that come down to? When you're taking care of yourself and when you attempt to take care of yourself and nurture yourself,
mm-hmm.
I have an answer, but
what's your answer?
It's habits.
Uh-huh.
It's habits. Like it's not about taking the cellophane off the toothpick, right? And throwing the cellophane on the street. It's just cellophane from a toothpick. You won't even see it. It's not that. That's the surface. But it's the habit behind that. If you next thing you know, it's not the cellophane of a toothpick. It's a Coke can, right? And then after that, it's a barrel of garbage that is overflowing that you have to get rid of because of whatever. And so I look at it as let's get into some habits here to help us become better selves. Mm-hmm. And then everything else, I believe in my heart of hearts, will become better. So habits, let's talk about that.
Right. So anything that's habituated is, by definition, something that you're not consciously thinking about. It just is, in a sense, a reflex. It's a sort of default response. So those aren't necessarily all bad. In fact, we need to be able to go on autopilot for a lot of things, or we'd be on cognitive overload most of the time. Ultimately, what I think you're referencing there with the idea of like sort of discarding a piece of litter without thoughtfulness about it is cause and effect. What are the consequences of my actions which relate to what am I thinking about that drive my actions? And you can escalate it to, whatever you want, from, the piece of cellophane to the barrel of garbage, to garbage as, sort of a metaphor for all kinds of bad decisions or garbage output. And, how can you be more thoughtful? And changing habits is inordinately difficult, precisely because they're under the radar most of the time. We don't think about why we're doing something or what it's about, or, it's easy to look the other way and not think about it, like you were saying, well, it's just a piece of cellophane. So we can rationalize or justify just about anything. And that's a part of what gives rise to, fuzzy ethics and all kinds of wrongdoing. But you're not talking about any kind of willful malice. You're just it's about thoughtlessness. And so changing habits starts at least with noticing that the habit is there, and then being more thoughtful about what are the consequences of it, and is there something about that maybe would be better to change, and how can we go about doing that? And if you have some problem in your business, whether you need a new website and you want to call Unique Designs, or your piece of office equipment is broken and you have to get in a specialist to do that, you shouldn't think of the human element any differently.
So good. So good. So good. Well, I have to stay conscious of time here. I know your time is valuable. I want to get into the doc's prescription here and highlight a few things that really came glowing out of this conversation. Alexander, I could talk to you forever about this stuff.
Let's do it.
I would love to have you on my YouTube channel.
Be my pleasure. Let's do
I would love. We'll talk about this off air, but we will get you back on my YouTube channel, and we'll dive into some other topics that revolve around this, because I know my audience is sitting here going, "Oh, give me more, give me more." But awesome. I like to keep these tight, so stay tuned, guys. Check out my YouTube channel in the next few weeks. You're going to see Alexander on on the show for sure. But a couple of things that you said that I really, really love was we got to start asking ourselves why more, and there's some deep education that we can find out about ourselves when we start to ask ourselves, why are we doing certain things? And that's going to help us define if we're the solution or the problem or not. So I really want you to pay attention to those why questions, and don't be afraid to ask them of yourselves, and don't be afraid to ask them of others too. Because, the people that are closest to you know you the best, and they're going to give you that honest feedback. And so listen to it and do something with it. My wife sometimes tells me things about myself that's very, very tough to hear. And I'm glad that she does it, though. I mean, that's just me. I could get all defensive about it and stamp my feet, yell and scream, or I can take it in and digest it. And some things I may have to put on the shelf, but some things I may say, you know what, she's got a point. So that's number one. Number two, I talk about this a lot, but Alexander mentioned a legitimate confidence. Legitimate confidence. If you don't believe in yourself and your ability to serve your audience, deep down, this is deep now, what makes you think that your audience is going to believe in you? So you have to, whatever that may be, through habit, through personal development, whether you're reading books or watching videos or listening to podcasts or getting a mentor, getting a coach that you meet with for accountability. And I love what you said before. You said the blind spots that your mentors are able to see. I was just talking about this the other day. I said, Chris, you're on the outside. You see the outside of the label. I can't see it. So you got to help me out here. And, we're going on 16 sessions now over the past 18 months. Like, he's not afraid to tell me. Right. And so we have that relationship. And I think as a mentor, you're really doing your clients a disservice if you're holding any of that back. So definitely, I don't want to go too off topic here, but you really got to find that confidence, because in my belief, people are going to buy your confidence first, then they're going to buy your product or service. So very important there. And then I love this last one here. So what are the consequences? You need to ask yourself this question. What are the consequences of thoughtlessness? Mm-hmm. What are the consequences of thoughtlessness? If you're just going half-cocked all the time and making these decisions like that without taking a conscious effort and slowing down. I was just talking about this with a client, brand accelerator client. He's like, I'm so quick to get through this because I want to slow down, dude. Sometimes you got to slow down in order to speed up. So I told him, I said, if you're thinking about making any large purchases in regards to brand collateral like websites or PPC ads or anything like that, let's get through this process first, because there's more to uncover. I don't want you tying up monies here and there when I get you. And then we go through the phase of prioritizing our goals, and you realize that this is much more efficient, but you ran out of capital. I hate to see that for you. So what are the consequences of not thinking things through? And I want to challenge you guys to slow down a little bit. We live in such a fast-paced world. I think it's smart for us these days to slow down, be thoughtful, and make better decisions. So that was awesome. So let's get that out of the way. Let's get into questions from the community. All right. So Alexander said, don't tell me the question. I want to be surprised. And that is not normal. I typically, all my guests are like, you got to tell me now. I got to write notes. I got to figure it out. Right. But here's the question. How do you handle a client that's trying to take over the project? So whether you're a designer or a consultant, and you've been engaged to create a project and deliver a solution, and now the client's coming in and they're dictating. How do you handle that, right? I'm going to let you go first, and then I'll give you my response.
Sure. And I expect that we're going to have different responses because we're going to be speaking about it from different professional perspectives. So as an advisor to business leaders, one of my roles, speaking of thinking about consequences, is that I fundamentally am given license to speak truth to power. And if I don't talk about some of the things that are going on, what I call putting the moose on the table sometimes, means that I'm derelict in my duty. And so, if there's a power struggle between my client and me, first of all, I would take that as probably indicative or maybe even symptomatic of other ways that he or she is handling matters in the business. And that's an important factor that needs to be, brought out to the surface and brought into play at some point. And I'm probably not going to confront it. I'm going to, find some ways around the edges or come in through a side door to ask some questions and to learn a little bit about it and, what's driving it, what's going on, and to try to enlist the client as a collaborator, as an ally with me in figuring out what this is and see, is this actually a problem? Is this something that's in the way? Or, is there something I don't understand that maybe the person's trying to signal to me and maybe he or she is actually right and I'm wrong and I should shut up and listen? There could be a lot of things that are going on there and you have to pay attention to, what's causing it and what else is happening in context.
And I love it. So yes, I think the what you said about asking questions and not confronting it head on, because when a bull's coming at you at full bore, the last thing you want to do is put your head down and go head to head with a raging bull. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that you're using questions to get out of the way, if you will, or to really get an understanding of what's going on here. Because maybe, like you said, you may be doing something that you just don't know you're even doing, and it's driving this person's nuts. Like my wife leaving all the cars with empty gas tanks, and every time I get in, there's stuff. I don't tell her that drives me crazy. She's going to continue to do it. So it's a great question. So I'll tackle this question from another angle. So as a creative and as somebody who develops large scale projects from scratch, right? There's been times in the past, and this has been a learning lesson for me, being in business for 13 years doing this stuff, is if you don't set clear expectations up front, you're going to leave a lot of headache later on. So what I typically do on my introductory consult call with my clients is I run them through a quick little paragraph, and it simply goes like this. What gets my clients the best results is they hire who they trust and they trust who they hire. And, I always use this as a silly example, but you're getting wheeled in for knee surgery, right? And the doc's behind you and you're about to go into the OR and you look up at him and you say, "Hey doc, are you really going to use those scalpels? To like, you're not going to use that one over there?" Like, you wouldn't do that because at that point you've put all your trust in that doctor, and he's going to, or she's going to get you your knee fixed. Period. End of discussion. So I tell them I've in my experience in the past, I've had clients come in and it's good up until a point, and then all of a sudden they become brand strategists, they become art director, they become copywriter. And the whole project starts to get out of hand. And so if I don't know if that they just have all the time in the world and they just need that, control or what. But I'm going to tell you up front, if that's you, we're probably not going to be a good fit here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just saying that alone, the normal response is typically this: "Henry, that's why I'm hiring you. Mm-hmm. I'm not a designer. I'm not a marketer. I don't do these things. This is why I'm calling you. Like, right. I need time to do this stuff over here." Mm-hmm. And so as soon as I hear that, I go, we're already going in the right direction.
So I know we're running out of time, but two things that I'd love to say in response to your story is, one is the power of speaking up. That if you don't talk about the thing that's going on, it's going to keep going on. And nobody knows what it is. It's just going. Basically you're still just littering and it's a habit or whatever. So, you can only make things change, not by, so-called disruption, but by really verbalizing some of the things that are happening, even if it's uncomfortable or awkward. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that it is actually easy, you were talking about hubris before, for people to minimize expertise, whether it's in brand strategy or as the case may be. And I find that in the main, there's almost nothing easier to minimize the value of than people, because everyone's like, well, I'm a person. I took psychology in college. What is there to know? Like, if somebody knows a little bit, they know everything. And that's more than enough. And you find this in large organizations a lot, where aspects of the human factor get, relegated to HR or human capital management or something, and they don't really take these issues seriously enough. And so, it's very important actually to elevate it almost to the level of having, the solid expertise valued for what it adds, because every organization is a human ecosystem. And if you don't start by really attending to the human part of that, everything else is, chrome, basically.
So true. So true. Dr. Alexandar Stein, what a pleasure to meet you. What a pleasure to have the honor of spending 35 minutes with you today and having your insights on today's show. For those folks that want to learn more about you and what you do, where can we send them?
So I believe that you're going to have a page for the podcast, right, that will have some links that we can put up. So I'll put my website, which, by the way, could probably use your help. And also I'm a regular contributor to Forbes.com, and I'll put the link up there so that people can follow my writing there. I look forward to interacting with any of your listeners if they're interested in learning more.
I love it. I love it. Thanks again for coming on the show, my friend.
Thank you, Henry. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
You got it. So there you have it, guys. Another episode in the books. Real quick, before I forget, hit that subscribe button right now. If you haven't subscribed yet to this podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that button right now and subscribe. Drop some comments. Drop some questions. Like I said before, we're going to have Dr. Stein back on the show over there on YouTube, because a lot of you folks are consuming a lot of my videos as well. And I can talk to this man for days about this stuff, because I think it's so important for us as entrepreneurs and business owners to really develop ourselves first before we try to develop products and services and attention and engagement and social media, all of that stuff. Like, you really got to work on the foundational things first before you can build the house or build the skyscraper, right? Last but not least, guys, if you haven't checked out my monthly group training, the Brand Doctors Growth Club is open for enrollment. I'm only taking 15, 20 folks at the moment. We're going to keep this group very, very small and intimate, because I believe when we keep it tight, we keep it right. So I will leave the links in the show notes and in the descriptions. Enroll now, grab a spot before it's too late. I will be closing it up as soon as I hit my capacity. Go check that out right now if you're looking for, monthly mentorship and coaching when it comes to building your brand and building your business. So have an amazing day, guys, and I'll catch you on the next episode real soon. Take care.
You've been listening to the Brand Doctor Podcast with Henry Kaminsky Jr. To get your appointment with the doctor, visit Brand Audit at www.uniquedesigns.net.